Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Nice to have you back here. Nice to have the guys back here. Guys and gals. Great to have you all back. It's been another eventful week, and let's get right into it. While we were actually broadcasting last week, Phil, the Sunday Times came out with a great poll. Techie, I wonder if you could put up the result of that poll for independence. There we go. 53% yes, 47% no. It just is consistent, Phil. Every single poll for the last 3 years has shown that independence is in the majority. And yet, as we repeat so often on here, the main party of independence is about 25 points behind that.
Yeah, the supposed main party of independence, but they're not, and that's why they're 20 points behind. And the gap is getting bigger. Mind the gap. SNP don't seem to bother so long as certain snouts remain in the big trough. That's just the bottom line. But that's no surprise. The people of Scotland are realising the shambles that is the British government, the way the EU is going. We see it in the streets. It's like the piece of advice my dad gave us when I started getting involved in politics. He said, don't listen to all that crap. What to do is look out your window, look at your town, what the prospects of your kids, what's your healthcare like, what's your education like, and it's going down the tubes. You know, you look down the main street of Coatbridge, it's a ghost town. The reason I keep going back to Coatbridge is I keep saying it's the people. The people matter, not the place, because it's getting worse. Opportunities are getting worse, and so people are realising that, and they know. People aren't stupid. They know that independence will get us out. It's the only thing that will save us. Independence, nothing less. And the SNP, sadly, they're not interested. They just want to stay in power as long as they can. And why they continue with this crazy mantra, the only logical conclusion that they're going for is Section 30 and both votes SNP, is that they do not want change. They are that old band with a three-chord trick, status quo. And that's what they're into. And sadly, nothing's going to change if we vote SNP, because to me, the people of Scotland are clear in their minds what they want. They know what they want. They've told time and time again at polls and elections what they want. They want independence, nothing less. And this time, SNP had better wake up, because now the people have options. It's independence, nothing less.
Absolutely. But that's it, Alan. I can't remember a poll in the recent, as I say, couple of years that hasn't shown a majority for independence. The people are ready. They're just waiting for the political will.
This is it. Consistently, polls are showing independence is the preferred option for the people of Scotland. And this is without any campaigning being done. Now, if we're hitting 53% before any campaigning's been done, that will go up to 60, 70% when we have the campaign on the streets. It's clear evidence that the people of Scotland want independence. So why are our political leaders not pushing it? People of Scotland have got to start seriously questioning the SNP, whether they are really an independence party, because it doesn't look like it. There's no point of saying we are ahead of the polls and then sending begging letters to Westminster. We have the power here. We have the people behind us. We should be telling Westminster, we are going independent. Be ready for it. Because remember, no independence is ever granted by the power. It is taken by the brave. And we must be very, very brave. And we must also be very, very wise. Because in 2026, there is only one organisation offering you independence, nothing less. And that is Liberate Scotland. We're not interested in getting bums on seats in the Parliament. We're not interested in getting onto gravy trains. Because we're in this for outcomes. not incomes. So
Yeah.
think very carefully in 2026. It's liberate Scotland to liberate Scotland.
Well said, Alan. On the theme, again, that opinion poll showing that the people are willing. The conference coming up, we're in the conference season, Eva, and the SNP, they're going to have a debate on independence, and I welcome that. I think that's great. But what the funny thing is, it's the first independence debate by the SNP in 11 years.
That's incredibly disappointing and quite frankly terrifying at this time in our country's history. We should not need to have the conference season for political parties to bring independentistas round the table. As Alan has said, we're in this for outcomes, not incomes. It's not about bums on seats, it's about votes. And we can talk about these opinion polls until the cows come home. There is absolutely no point in John Swinney talking about what we will do when Scotland is independent if he's not going to take active steps to create the circumstances where independence will in fact come around. Now, Scotland's name was on the lips of every international statesman recently when Liberation took the case to the UN and made their presentation there, and people learned what Professor Black had to say, what Alf Baird had to say, and one that really struck a chord with me and went right into my heart was Ailsa Gray. When these people were the world watched and the world listened, and those steps were magnificent, and it was very, very stirring to watch and to listen. But those steps on their own will not take our country into independence. We need an electoral event. We need a democratic event where, again, the eyes of the world will be upon us as they watch us vote for independence. And that won't happen with John Swinney's strategy, but it will happen with some of the suggestions that are made by some of the SNP rebels and others in other parties who agree with our approach in Liberate Scotland, because people have to vote in a democratic election for independence. If they're only voting for the SNP, independence will not be the winner. We will remain devolved. We have to get out of the mindset of thinking about political parties and think about the outcomes, not the incomes. And all of the strategy that you're going to hear from the SNP leadership is about keeping them in a position of power. The people of Scotland need to take power back by supporting and voting for independence, nothing less, because the gap between support for the SNP and support for independence is of the order of 20% or so. And that's the magic number. It's that 20% that takes us from being colonised, subservient, devolved, a region, North Britain. That extra 20% support is what will turn us into being a country, not a county. We'll be a nation again when that extra bit that won't vote for the SNP but is desirous of independence is able to put a meaningful cross on a ballot paper and know that every vote counts. And every vote will count if we make Holyrood 26 a plebiscite and we're able to vote collectively and constructively for a collaborative movement where we're looking at the future of our nation and not another 5 years on the gravy train for those who have got far too comfortable sitting there in a devolved parliament, making laws that are a complete and utter waste of time and a waste of money for as long as we don't control our own resources and our own fate.
Quite right, absolutely. And while it's to be welcomed, Lloyd, after 11 years, we're actually having a debate by the SNP on independence, and we know that the rebel amendment's been chosen. Great to see the members are actually talking against the leadership. But in the other party, ALPA, they're having no independence debate at their conference this autumn.
Yeah, that's what I find very, very surprising, given what Eva's just referred to, the 20% gap between support for the SNP and support for independence. One would expect that certainly the ALPA party, the the party of Alex Salmond, that they would be outlining at their conference their strategy for next year's Scottish Parliament election. But I believe from friends I know who are in the Alapa party that is not the case. Now, not only is that surprising, but I think it's somewhat dilatory of them to fail to do so. Because at this point, when you have that gap between support for the SNP and support for independence being around the 20% mark, you would expect that Alapa would press the case on this issue, thereby making themselves, to some degree, not the challengers, but the pressure on the Scottish National Party to move forward on a sensible approach to independence. But then again, maybe those in Alapa are aware, as I am as a member of the Scottish National Party, that irrespective of what is debated at the Scottish National Party conference, and indeed whatever the outcome of the debate on the independence strategy is, it's not incumbent on the leadership of the Scottish National Party to actually put any of the conference decisions into practice. This is the unfortunate circumstance we have. I mean, in some ways, maybe the Scottish National Party are allowing the debate so that people can exercise their frustrations. But in reality, it will be the decisions of the leadership, particularly John Swinney, about whether or not they actually apply the results of the conference decisions. But that aside, let's look at the real situation here. If, according to the Sunday Times, and remembering the Sunday Times is no friend of the movement for independence, it's very much part of the great British establishment. If their poll finds that 53% of the people are in support of independence and 47% are not in support of independence, had that been the case in 2014, if independence had been at 53% in 2014, then 18 points would have been added to that 53%. So it would have been 71% on the 18th of September 2014, 71% in favour of independence, and we would be independent. And as Alan says, with a campaign, you take that 53% up, and if it's done on the same basis of what happened in 2014, then clearly there is a massive majority for independence. Now, sometimes we get bogged down in talking about things in the shorthand form that people in the political bubble do. I think a lot of people don't quite understand why the SNP is not making its move in this particular election, why it isn't suggesting to people at this particular stage that next May can be the election that delivers our country's freedom and independence. They can't understand why the Scottish National Party has not thrown its weight completely behind the Liberation Scotland initiative at the United Nations, because that's all good news about independence. Why is the SNP not shouting from the rooftops about the fact that good news for the independence movement is that the United Nations is now working through a process that will help towards our decolonisation? Now, it's because we talk about things like a Section 30. Most people have no idea what Section 30 is. What we need to do is just not refine our language, but simplify it. The Scottish National Party are asking for another referendum, when we've already had a Supreme Court judgment that says that you're not getting another referendum. We have had the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, state very clearly only last week that under no circumstances will he allow a referendum. So what does that say? That says that next year, if you believe in independence, the May election for the Scottish Parliament should be a plebiscite election whereby all votes for the pro-independence parties are counted together. But most importantly of all, if the strategy is to be correct, then the Scottish National Party has to say, given the twisted DeHont system that we have, particularly on the regional list system, they have to say that they will stand only in the constituency seats, that they will not stand on the list, and they will leave the list open to pro-independence parties, preferably under the banner of Liberate Scotland as an overall umbrella, and thereby deliver a majority into the Scottish Parliament, which then allows us to move very rapidly to negotiation with the United Kingdom Parliament, not asking for a referendum, not asking for anything, but saying to them very clearly, the people have voted. There has been a plebiscite. The people have voted in a majority for parties that support independence. So now is the time to get round the table and discuss the form in which our independence will be given, or taken rather, but also the negotiation of the internal terms of that, the settlement, the reparations our country requires, given the fact that our natural resources have been exploited, our people have been exploited for over 300 years to benefit only the Westminster government and the rump of the rest of the United Kingdom, which is principally England. If this were 1918, 1919 in Ireland, then we would take the same approach as the Irish political parties did, which was, if there was a majority for them in the 1918 election, then they would not take their seats in Westminster, but they would set up their own parliament. We don't have to do that. We've got a parliament. But what their position was, immediate negotiation for independence. And this is what I want to hear from the Scottish National Party. It's what I want to hear from ALAPA. And what I also want to hear is that they will support the initiative that is Liberate Scotland, because that provides us and provides the people with the quickest possible exit from this disunited kingdom.
Hear, hear. The other thing, yeah, it's going to give a supermajority as well. That's the great thing, is your supermajority and fewer unionists. What's not to like, folks? Fewer unionists. But as we're getting into an election period, a party that's not mentioned or done anything in 5 years to promote independence in any way, shape or form, the same party that told us that unless you believe that a man can be a woman, we don't want your vote, we don't want your membership, we don't want anything to do with you. They've come out. Techie, can you stick up the headline for me? They're going to come out with an aggressive, combative independence strategy. Must be an election coming, Phil, because they've said nothing for 5 years and now they're trying to show the people they've got independence credentials. Charlatans.
Yeah, indeed they are, and they're just rattling out the old collection tin just before an election, as they always do, making the same noises but following the same strategy. And this is that Ross Greer and his sidekick, who are now the new leaders of the Green Party. They previously, I mean, I'll be straight up, Ross was great when he was in Yes Aberdeenshire, Yes Aberdeen, the Yes campaign in the North East. He did a lot of good work, and I worked with him and thoroughly enjoyed working with him. But my God, did he pick up a banjo and learn that and sit in the porch for a wee while? Because now this madness of the Green Party that he's joined, and some of the policies are absolutely just out of order. They're bonkers, mad, absolutely mad. You cannot support some of these philosophies and policies. And also the critical part here is it still remains the Greens' intention, I believe. I haven't heard anything new, even with this new announcement, that changes anything other than they're going to follow the same route as the SNP, which is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It's not real. It's the same as the SNP are doing. They're getting their old flags and banners and hoping that you're going to march behind them in the wrong direction, people. It's the wrong direction. And they're good at that. That's all they can do. And for me, the Greens, waste of time. SNP, again, at this election, a waste of time. Don't vote for them unless you want to support a party that is isolating and alienating 52% of the population, i.e. all the women and girls, and that will not take us to independence. So to hell with them all.
Techie, can you also, in part of that article, Alan, that Ross Greer did, he came out with a statement, and I'd just like to highlight one of the bits at the end. If you could stick that up, Techie. There we go. And it's the bit I wanted. We all need to acknowledge that we will not become an independent nation until that is clearly, undisputedly, the settled role of the majority of the people who live here. That's fine up to now. Then it comes. Yes is now just ever so slightly in the lead if you look at the average of recent polls. But that's not the kind of decisive lead that we need for the kind of political pressure that we require. That's the old soft nose nonsense again, Alan, isn't it? And it's also a big red herring. 50% plus one is a democratic event, a democratic outcome, a democratic decision.
Well, I mean, Mr. Greer doesn't know much about democracy, does he? I mean, what was he elected on? A couple of hundred votes to become leader of his party. More than 2/3 of his party didn't come out to vote for him. So what chance has he got of going out to the people of Scotland? And his combative style, what is it? Handbags at dawn. Because they still haven't ruled out a coalition with the Labour Party. Because for the Greens, independence is not a red line. I mean, the Greens are neither an independence party nor an environmental party. They are a party of woke. They have taken over from the raving lunatic party with their policies, and it's just not good enough. But I mean, the people of Scotland have got to look at the Green Party and see what they actually are. Because if you're voting for them for independence, you will never, ever see independence. What you will see is more incompetent government, like what they brought in with the SNP, a bottle return scheme that was a disaster and cost this country billions of pounds. Men try to get into women's toilets and women's changing rooms and use women's services when women themselves cannot get these facilities. That's what you're voting for with the Greens. And remember, it was them that said, unless you support the idea that a man can become a woman, they do not want your vote. Well, I'll tell you, if that's your views, if you do not believe that a man cannot become a woman, then Liberate Scotland is the place for you to come. Because we don't believe a man could turn into a woman. It's just biologically impossible to do. What you're going to have to vote for, especially your second votes, if you're determined that you're going to vote for your party on the constituency, then on your second vote for your country, not your party. And that is Liberate Scotland. That's the only way we are going to be able to get into that parliament and not say, please, sir, can we have another referendum? We will be going in there and say, either get around the table or we're switching your lights off because we are going independent.
Yeah, well said. Like a wee bit of militancy there. Eva, this, the Greens suddenly finding their independence credentials. Well, as I said, for the last 5 years, I've not seen them do one thing for independence. Have you? I haven't seen one of them all under one banner, for example.
I was really thrilled to see this because Ross Greer and Gillian Mackay, since they've become the joint leaders of the Greens, have outdone themselves in terms of their lunacy. And I went away to check when it was that Lorna Slater put her foot in her mouth, and it was October 2023 when she said independence is not a red line, when she confirmed that actually, if it came to the bit, the Greens would go into a coalition with Labour because they felt that they had quite a lot in common with them. So the Greens just change their colours and their principles to suit their particular personal purposes. It's not about principles. It's certainly not country over party. But what I found particularly enlightening about Ross Greer's recent outburst is that headlines would lead you to believe that he had a plan, he had a strategy, he was going to outline a process whereby Scotland could become independent. But when I actually read what he said was, let's talk about independence, let's talk about the benefits of independence, because that might increase support for independence, and then when we've done that, we might become independent. He doesn't give us the detail about the how or the where or the when or the why. It's not there. But it isn't there because it's not in his head. He doesn't do joined up thinking. He doesn't do deeds and consequences. He doesn't plan. He doesn't strategize. He's not thinking beyond holding on to his seat next May. And where he betrays himself and he betrays his motivation and the reason for that speech is one line where he says, there is no cheat code. There is no quick, easy route to gaining independence. It's a long, hard struggle. When he says there is no cheat code, that is a direct reference to Liberate Scotland and to the notion that the Scottish independence movement should use the Better Together tactics from 2014 to unite a movement, but this time to unite a movement for independence, unlike Better Together, who were for the continuance of the Union. So Ross Greer's scared that Liberate Scotland takes off, that people understand that it's a very plain and simple strategy, and sometimes keep it simple is what works. People understand that if you're saying on one strapline, independence, nothing less, that's what you're promising, that's what you'll deliver. No bums on seats, outcomes, not incomes. And that's what Ross Greer and the Greens don't like. They tried to hitch their wagon onto the independence trail. It didn't work for them because they were booted out of government when they should never have been in government in the first place. And with a bit of luck, they'll never be in government again in their current form, because the current Greens are not the Greens of old. They're not the Greens of Robin Harper or people like him. They are warped, and some of their views are particularly unwelcome in Scotland, as the women won't wheesh people will say. So I look forward to the day when Ross Greer is standing at account, looking at a result, and understands that he's lost his seat because his party lost its way and they lost any faith that the Scottish people ever put in them. So there is a cheat code. It's using the system and playing the system for the benefit of Scotland, and that's what Liberate Scotland is about. You vote for your country, not your party, and that's how we'll regain our independence.
Indeed. I believe it was around 17,000 votes he got from 8 constituencies that got him in and keeps him in. Quite frightening. But the Greens, Lloyd, suddenly found their independence credentials. Do you believe that?
Not for a second. And most specifically, when Mr. Greer used the gaming term cheat code. Was it a cheat code that led to the Easter Rising in Ireland in 1916? Was it a cheat code that the Mau Mau people of Kenya had to rise up against their British masters? Was it Gandhi's movement in India? Was that a cheat code? What does this boy read? What does this boy understand of British history? The fact of the matter is, and there's no cheating involved, the British establishment created the split voting system in Scotland of first past the post on the constituencies and a mutation, and remember this is very important, a mutation of Mr. de Hondt's system for the regional lists with the certain purpose of making sure that the Independence Party of the time, the Scottish National Party, could never gain a full majority alone. Now, if that's not a cheat code, what is? The fact of the matter is, if you are an independence and a liberation-seeking organisation, political party or movement, then you make use of every possible tool that is in the box. And if it just so happens that your colonial masters have failed to recognise the central mistake of their mutated version of de Hondt, then you use that. As was pointed out to me by Koldo Gorostiaga, the Basque member of the European Parliament in 2001, if you want to win your independence, then one party of independence stands in the constituencies and wins the constituencies. It does not stand on the list because a separate organisation structure like Liberate Scotland stands on the list in harmony with the party and constituency to deliver a majority for independence in a manner which requires nothing as dramatic as the Easter Rebellion or Gandhi's movement in India. Nothing as dangerous or as blood-soaked as the Mau Mau Rebellion in Kenya. What you're simply doing is using the democratic tools that have been laid out before you. Now, if the British establishment have made a mistake in laying out the tools in such a manner, then I'm sorry. That's not our fault. That's their fault. And it is incumbent on those who believe in the independence of our country and the future of our children to use the mistake the British have made by creating this false democracy of the constituency and the regional list and the mutated de Hondt system. And more importantly, it's exactly the sort of thing that if the Scottish National Party was entirely committed to independence and had an intellectual spine and backbone, they would be examining and taking forward this particular strategy and combining that, in essence, with the strategy laid out by Liberation Scotland and Salvo as taken to the United Nations in Geneva just the other week. All of these things fit together, and what they fit together to create is a liberation movement on the broadest possible sense, international and outward-looking, and internal as well, exciting the people on the basis of voting for an independence party in the constituency and the support of that same independence party to a coalition like Liberate Scotland on the list to deliver the majority in the Parliament that does not require us in any way whatsoever to seek any other path like a referendum, but to move directly to negotiations for the freedom of our country. The Green Party fail to understand this. And it's as exactly as Eva said, it's because independence is something that is just attached to them. It's not in their heads. They do not think on a day and daily basis, how do we address this issue of the degradation of our environment? How do we address the issue of our lack of housing? How do we address the issues of depopulation? The only answers to those questions are with absolute control of your natural resources, your economy, and of the politics of our country and our ability to make and to create international relations on our terms, not on the terms created by or wished for by Westminster. Now, I would suggest also the Green Party are not alone in that kind of shallow thinking. At the moment, I see in the leadership of the Scottish National Party, and particularly when I look at the list of proposed candidates for the Scottish election next year, that shallow thinking is moving into a second generation. The fact of the matter is, we need people in our Parliament who have read their history, understand their history, have an appreciation of economics, have an appreciation of what is natural justice. And natural justice is the people of this country being able to have the fruits not only of their labour, but the fruits of the natural resources that exist in this country. I know we'll go on to talk about energy later on, but the fact is, the Greens, as Eva has said, have lost their way. There is little or no environmental campaign from the Greens, and there is little or no attempt at democracy from the Greens. For once, and this has also been articulated, anyone who votes for a party that says 52% of the population of this country who believe very firmly and understand that the Gender Recognition Reform Bill absolutely threatened the rights of every woman and girl in this country, and that they do not want the votes of the people who perceive the Gender Recognition Reform Bill as a threat to women and girls. They stated it. Ross Greer stated it, that they do not want the votes and they do not want the membership fees of people who believe that. Now, I'm sorry. How possibly can we even consider for 1 second a vote for a Green Party, either in terms of support of independence or indeed in terms of support for the democratic rights of the women and girls of our country? It's an absurdity. And the Greens should have a serious think about whether or not they are, in fact, anymore actually a democratic political organisation.
I agree 100%. But here's the thing, there's a huge British political problem just now, Phil. Now, we don't care. I mean, the more problems the British political system's got, the better. But the big problem they all envisage is reform, because he's going to stop the two boys club. Because it's a boys, who's the prefect this year? Who's going to sit in the big boys' seat in Westminster? And suddenly they've got new kids in the block. And we've seen John Swinney joining in to help the Brits with a problem, which I find completely bizarre, mental. The old story, John, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. But John chose to do that. And the media, the establishment, foreign media in Scotland are trying to engineer that as well. There was a part of that opinion poll, Phil, which I think is worth noting. Techie, stick up. This is one of the, now we don't know the question they asked. We can only imagine. But this is the question, and this is what come back. Have you got either, Techie, the proposed SNP and Labour coalition. I think, there we go. It says SNP and Labour voters are open to coalition deal to shut out reform. Now, I've not heard of anyone in Scotland talking about shutting out reform, apart from the SNP and Labour and the Conservatives. Isn't that funny, Phil?
Yeah, it's we shouldn't be shocked, but when you look at it for what it is, rather than take advantage of the chaos and the decay and the destruction of our society as we speak in front of our very eyes. The economy's bust. We're about to go into a massive recession. All the parties are in pieces. They're virtually all singing from the same song sheet, and that sadly now includes the SNP. It's exactly the same. They try to reverse Brexit, the whole gender recognition. They're trying to fight reform to save England from itself. And Eva talked about the thing earlier. The big story they should be talking about, that people should be getting online and see the speeches made by that superb group of Scottish independentistas. No SNP, by the way, they weren't there. The true patriots we should be talking about, Sailor Sayers, Professor Alf Baird, Craig Murray, Elsa Gray, and especially Robert Black, KC, Professor Emeritus of Scots Law at Edinburgh Uni, along with the SSRG team, Mark McNaught and other worthies. Check it out on social media. We've got to do this. But on this supposed coalition between SNP and Labour, even the Aberdeen Chamber of Commerce reported that Labour and SNP voters would back a coalition to lock out reform. It's nonsense. This is two unionist parties together. It's not about independence. They should be screaming independence, nothing less, from the top of the rooftops. They should be finding there needs to be a pragmatic, practical way forward. We've spelled it out here, and we've also outlined, as many others have, that the SNP current plan is not for independence. It's for maintenance of the status quo. So according to this poll, and this is polls but geared up, and who asked the questions, it's all geared up to promote a comfy unionist resolution to stand up against reform. But you're right, the Scots, we're not worried about reform here. We're not right wing. We haven't voted for the Conservatives. We don't vote the right wing. And sadly, the more we wake up to the fact that Labour are just this different cheek of the same arse, the better, the sooner the better. But this was Northstat on behalf of the Times. 46 of SNP voters at last year's general election would now support a coalition with Labour with a view to reducing the influence of reform. Now, whether people have thought that through, but if they were asked, see if they'd been asked the real question, would you support independence? We saw the other poll earlier on, 53% say yes. That's what we should be focusing on, not this absolute rubbish. It's a nonsense story, and it's a con. It's a con. The people are being conned again, because one thing's for sure, what the polling does show, no party is likely to win a majority in May's election, although the SNP is still expected to be the biggest. But they're not going to get a majority. It's appalling. It's a scam.
Yeah, it's just like, in times gone by where the British would say to people that were about to colonise, well, if we don't colonise you, the French will. So, what's your choice? I mean, literally, that was it. It's the same now. Oh, the Russians are coming to get you and they'll colonise you, Scotland and Wales. Oh, well, Russian women look better, there's vodka. What's not to like? In comparison, before you all start complaining, I was just using it as an example. But we shouldn't be surprised that the unionists are trying to promote this, Alan, because we all know, Sturgeon talked about how she still felt British and she could do business with Labour. Holmes has said the exact same. Stephen Flynn of the SNP said, yeah, we could do a deal with Labour. How can any independence party do a deal with any unionist party?
Well, the reason the unionists are pushing this is because they have clicked on that we now know how to use the system by having two independence parties pushing forward, exact same way as the unionists have been doing since 1999. We now know how to play a system, and they are crapping themselves. I mean, the SNP going into coalition with the Labour Party, I mean, that's like me as a diabetic going into coalition with Cadbury's chocolate. I mean, it's not good for the health. And the SNP have really got to waken up for this, because even if you went into coalition with Labour in the Scottish Parliament to protect us from reform have no powers in Scotland. Where they do have powers is at Westminster, where even now they are pulling the strings of Starmer, making him push policies that no Labour Party would ever have pushed before. I mean, they've gone further to the right than what the Tories have done. That's where the problem is. And it doesn't matter how Scotland votes at Westminster elections. England will be the ones who decide what power Reform have, whether it is in coalition or outright control of Westminster. The only way that we can save ourselves from Westminster is by becoming an independent Scotland. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if all the parties of independence unite and we play the system. Because let's face it, we're not here to manage England's colony. We're here to end it. And the only way we can end that is putting people with backbone into Holyrood in 2026. And I'm afraid at this present time, Liberate Scotland are the only ones with the backbone.
Absolutely. And they can't complain. Oh, you worked the system. Well, it's your system. It was a British implemented system. And in fact, I saw, I don't know if any of you saw, I saw a clip this way of Malcolm Bruce when he was leader of the Liberals, saying that he didn't want that system. And this has led to the SNP getting into power in government. And so we'll have to go back and revise the voting system. So they admitted they rigged it for themselves. So they couldn't complain to the, well, you can't have your independence because, that system you used that we put in place, no, doesn't work. But here's the thing, two parties is the way to do it, Eva. Absolutely, we know that. Mathematics tell you that. Everything tells you that. But 4 and 5 parties weakens the opposition. And that's what's happening. That's why we're shouting for unity. Don't be out on the outside, Alpa. Come into under the tent. Because when Reform come into the equation, suddenly the Unionists are scrapping about for the same votes. That leaves it for the Independence Party, if united, to wipe the floor, to take the whole lot, Eva.
This is absolutely the point, because theoretically at the moment, Westminster is as weak as it will ever be. These chances will not come again. And this is exactly why the independence movement has to be united and strike at this very moment in time, because these conditions are ideal for us to regain our independence. When I'm preparing for a court case, I tend, and here's some free advice for you, I tend to put myself into the shoes of my opponent and I try and figure out what they're thinking, what are they doing, what are they going to come up with that I've got to counteract. So I quite enjoy doing that. And now and again, I found myself putting myself in John Swinney's shoes. And I was just thinking there when the others were speaking, what happens to John Swinney when he wakens up in the morning and he's sitting in his striped pyjamas at his breakfast table, maybe in Butte House, and he's looking at his cornflakes or his toast or his cup of coffee? Does he think to himself that he's actually looking forwards to First Minister's questions where he's going to get slated for, the GRR bill or whatever it is? Or is he looking forward to opening a wing of a hospital but having to apologise to people that there's not enough money to build enough new hospitals? Is he looking forward to attending, a parent council meeting, something like that, and being asked why there's not enough teachers or there's not enough science teachers? Is he looking forward to opening a housing development and somebody's saying to him, but Scotland needs 100,000 more houses, there's 35,000 Scots people homeless? Is he looking forward to going to Glasgow to look at the safe consumption room for drugs and be confronted with the news that you're 4.5 times more likely to die from alcohol if you live in a poor part of Scotland than if you live in a wealthier part, or you're 13 times more likely to die a drugs death because you live in a poorer part of the country? Does he want all that bad news drummed into him day in and day out for the rest of his political career? Or does he want to waken up one morning and say, there's my list of phone calls, who have I got on speed dial? Pick up the phone. There's Kenny McCaskill, there's Colette Walker, there's David McCutcheon, there's Sarah Sawyers, there's Professor Black, there's Alec Neil, there's Anne-Marie Ward, and I am going to phone Roddy, and I will phone Phil and Lloyd and Eva and Alan. And do you know what? We'll get together and we'll write a list of 100 Scots, 100 Scots that can rebuild this country, take our independence, and overnight transform the future destiny of everybody in this land, born and as yet unborn. So if I was John Swinney and I was sitting in my jammies tomorrow morning at my breakfast table, I wouldn't be thinking about the schools and the hospitals and the houses that haven't been built yet. I would be thinking about the lives that could be rebuilt, the lives that will be rebuilt, the lives that will be saved and promoted, and the people who will achieve their potential if I just join up the movement and together wipe reform off the face of the Scottish political map, because the only reform that Scotland needs is independence, and the way to get it, John, is to pick up the phone and get the job done, and you'll go down in history as the man that regained Scotland's independence. What's not to like?
Exactly. So close. But this, you know, a British game coalition to keep out the bad guy. And there's always got to be a bad guy, Lloyd. But if the SNP were stupid enough to do that, it means they've just completely and absolutely fallen into British rules, and they're a British party playing the British game.
Yes, absolutely. But, you know, the two things, Roddy. On the run-up to the creation of the Scottish Parliament, there was a thing called the Scottish Constitutional Convention.
Yeah.
Now, initially, when the SNP were asked to join the Constitutional Convention, they refused to do so because of the options that the Constitutional Convention was prepared to look at were only devolution and some form of extended powers to the Scottish office, but no mention of independence. So the SNP of that time, under Alex Salmond's leadership, along with Jim Sillars at that time, who was deputy leader, said that they would not join the convention until it was accepted by the convention that an option that had to be considered by the convention was independence. Now, I would suggest that if there is even a suggestion of the possibility of a coalition with the Labour Party, then the first red line for John Swinney and the leadership of the Scottish National Party is that the Labour Party has to drop its opposition to independence for our country. That would be the only reason and the only grounds upon which you would even consider entering into a coalition with the Labour Party. And that would be if the Labour Party in Scotland became a party that was no longer opposed to independence. Now, we all know that is not going to happen. But let us look at the purpose behind asking the question and making the suggestion in the Sunday Times poll. This is not the first time. The Daily Mail ran a very similar story not more than 4 months ago. On some of the other so-called political podcasts from Scotland, this has been suggested by John Curtis. It's been suggested on the Bernard Ponsonby and Alex Massey show. It's been suggested on the Holyrood Sources show. And call me a cynic, but the fact of the matter is, what I believe is happening here is we are being softened up, completely softened up. The narrative is being changed, which will allow John Swinney to possibly consider going into coalition with the Labour Party or the Liberals or one of the unionist parties to keep out reform. This is the most intellectually bankrupt concept I have come across in many a long year, because we all know, as Eva has just stated, if you want to make sure that Scotland never comes under the ambit of the Reform UK party, then do what we should have done many years ago, become an independent country. Reform UK will not exist in an independent Scotland. The best way, the only way, the truthful way to defeat and remove reform from the political landscape in Scotland is by recreating the political landscape in Scotland into an independent landscape, a landscape of our country, of our people. And as I've said myself, and as Eva just said, the only reform we require is independence. And that should be the central focus, the only central focus of the leader of the Scottish National Party, not how to remain in power by coming to a coalition agreement with a unionist party. And as I said before, take the same position that Sillars and Salmond took over the Scottish Constitutional Convention. If a unionist party wants a coalition with the Scottish government or with the Scottish National Party, then they have only one thing and one thing to do, and that is to drop entirely their opposition to Scotland becoming an independent country, and only on that basis would you even consider making any arrangements with them whatsoever. But again, the only reform Scotland needs is independence.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's all sorts of reasons for that, why we want it. We know that, Phil. But just for anyone, now we're getting more and more unionists watching through a Scottish prism, ladies and gentlemen. And if you watch it live on YouTube on a Sunday, you'll be able to pick them out. They're very easy with their comments. So this is especially for you. Now, one of the big things during the general election was the Labour promise, Phil. They were going to save Grangemouth, Scotland's only refinery. The country in the Union that produces 96% of all of the UK's oil, they would keep our refinery. When that didn't happen, they said they would give us 200 million to transition out of the refinery. Didn't happen. But we had Anna Sarwar saying, but it's a private company, Techie, stick up the next slide, please, on Jaguar Land Rover. Best of my ability and knowledge, Jaguar Land Rover is a British institution, Indian owned, but a British institution. And we can't leave its future to chance. The government's underwriting a 1.5 billion loan to support it. And, because the national interest was important. And so it had to be saved. Why was it not in the national interest to save Grangemouth, Phil? He asked rhetorically.
Yeah, because the national interest is indeed England, is Britain, England's interest. That's what they look after. They certainly don't give a damn about us. And that's true. Jaguar Land Rover is owned by Tata Motors. So Indian automotive company acquired the brands from Ford in 2008 for 2.3 billion. So Tata Motors is a subsidiary of the Tata Group, and they remain the sole shareholder of Jaguar Land Rover today. And the UK government are willing to back this private car manufacturing company, as you said, Roddy, to the tune of 2/3 of the value of the company purchase price. It was bought for 2.3 billion. They're going to bail it out for 1.5 billion. And then, as you rightly point out, they don't save Grangemouth. They didn't save Ravenscraig, didn't save it. They didn't support the development of the fracturing and disintegrating energy sector in Scotland, not for the benefit of Scotland or the Scottish people. Yet we get to pay for this 1.5 bailout. We pay our percentage of it again and again and again. But they save English steel. Yeah, they look after themselves. And the government is going to guarantee, they're there to guarantee a 1.5 billion JLR loan after a cyber shutdown. Now, this is, they're willing to do this in a bid to support the suppliers as a cyber attack continues to halt production at the car making plants. Now, Peter Kyle, the business secretary, said the loan from a commercial bank would protect jobs in the West Midlands, Merseyside and across the UK. Well, the rest of England. So the manufacturer, they've been forced to suspend production after they've been targeted by hackers at the end of August. Growing concerns from some suppliers, mostly small businesses, fearing they would go bust. And there's about 30,000 directly employed in England, in the UK plants. About 100,000 work for firms in the supply chain, and some of these firms play part and work exclusively to Jaguar Land Rover, while others sell components to other car makers as well. This is the first time it's believed that this is a cyber attack has caused government bailout.
If you believe that.
Exactly, Ed. For me, this is looking after your own. Instead of building the infrastructure and keeping jobs where we want it there, to the benefit of the Scottish people, it's England first, second, third, and we're a sorry paltry end. We're an afterthought. They clearly don't give a damn about us, and it's about time we escaped independence. Nothing left. There's no other alternative here. This continues to be another slap in the face, another bit of damage to what economy we've got left. We're in pieces, and we need to get out to get on.
Yeah. The other one you didn't mention, of course, we shouldn't forget our Welsh cousins, Port Talbot. They couldn't save it, but they saved one in Scunthorpe. So the Celtic nations are not part of, when you hear these Labour and Tory and Reform, when they talk about the nation and the country, they're not talking about you, okay? They're not talking about you. They're talking about our English neighbours. And it's not the people of England's fault. Well, it is for electing them, I suppose. But the cyber attack, I don't believe either. I believe, this is the old cynic in me, I believe they shut down production and said, we'll pay off 30,000 people if you don't bail us out, and we're stopping production today. That's what I believe, and I bet you I'm right. But Alan, it just adds insult to injury for the workers of the petrochemical industry in Scotland, not just in the refinery, but the chain, the supply chain as well. That this happens, England's looked after again, Scotland's ignored. It's just salt in our wounds.
I mean, this is the latest, the 1.5 billion to go into the other billions that have bailed out so many different English companies. I mean, they bailed out the car makers, the banks, the energy firms,
Water,
all in England. Scotland gets nothing. It seems that the national interest stops at Berwick. And remember, all these billions of pounds that's been spent, we are paying at least, and I say at least, 8% of those supposed loans. Because they're not loans. I mean, they say it's loans with no interest. But these loans will never, ever be paid back. They'll be forgotten about down the road, and their friends and the big businesses will be sitting there rubbing their hands with more money from the taxpayers that will never, ever be paid back. And I'm getting sick and tired of Scotland's infrastructure, Scotland's people bankrolling the London, because that's exactly what's happening here. We're bankrolling London. Our resources built the British wealth. It's now time that our resources built the nation of Scotland again into an independent nation. And unless we do that, we are going to suffer even more. And I'll tell you, 2026, if we do not take our independence back then, we will suffer drastically. They will hit us with everything because they will know that we do not have the bottle to run our own country. So come on, people, grow backbones, think of what you're doing, and get to the ballot box on 7th of May, 2026, and put your X by Liberate Scotland.
Here. Eva, we're talking about fairness. We're getting told it's an equal union, a union of partners and equals. Well, in that case, if they've given out 1.5 billion, and as Alan points out, we've got to repay that, our share of it. Why do we not get a Barnett consequential and say, well, we saved a company down in England. Here, John Swinney, here is your 8.5% of that for you to save some businesses in Scotland. That would be a fair and equal union. Never going to happen. It's corporate socialism, nothing else.
The reason that we don't get that in Scotland is because Westminster and unionist parties do not fear the power of the people of Scotland or the current leadership of the Scottish government. They laugh at us. We know this from how they behave within the chamber. We know this from their actions, from their broken promises, and from what they failed to deliver. All you have to do to prove this is just Google 2 words, Labour and Grangemouth, and you'll see promises that were made by Anas Sarwar and by Brian Leishman, who's now the MP for Alloa and Grangemouth, that a vote for Labour was a vote to save Grangemouth, when all along English refineries, and there's 5 of them in England, English refineries were planning for the surplus in work they would have following Grangemouth's closure. They were planning for that. They were writing about it. There were press releases about it. There were headlines about it when Grangemouth was still open and able to be kept open. But the work went south, because the work always goes south and the money always goes south, because that's the way it works. That's what the union is. That's what Westminster is about. It's why Gordon Brown referred to Scotland as North Britain, because that's all we are. We're an adjunct. We're a cash cow. We're a resource to be bled. We're not an equal partner. We'll never be an equal partner. That's why the case about decolonisation at the UN is so important, and it rings true. It rings true because England rules Westminster. The Scots have no influence there. We have no power there. Our Scottish MPs are a handful within hundreds. So Scotland has never been and never will be the priority of Westminster. It's why we need to bring our government home. And it's why it is incumbent on John Swinney and all other leaders within the independence movement to get their collective shoulders to the wheel, get together and get this plan, Liberate Scotland, running. right round the whole country and make sure that what we do next year is that we do take our independence back and then start to turn Scotland into the country that Scotland is supposed to be. You know, we get criticised here for being critical of John Swinney, etc. But we're critical because we're desperate to see change and we're determined to see change. And because we, like so many hundreds of thousands of others, can see the country that Scotland would become were we independent. We would be slashing all the horrible figures that you see just now in terms of, as I said earlier, drugs deaths, alcohol deaths, suicide, the hopelessness that there is within people, particularly young men. We would be overnight able to tackle the housing emergency. We would be able to start planning proper infrastructure, whether it's bridges, roads, railways. We would be looking very sensibly and very carefully about being able to do away with food banks and baby banks and school clothing banks. We wouldn't have to think about universal credit anymore because people would be paid a real wage. You know, the government wouldn't be subsidising the employers that pay low wages because people would get a decent wage for a decent day's work. You know, the country would be transformed where our resources available for our own use, not spending money on weapons of mass destruction, not bankrolling illegal wars, not being one of the bullies on the international stage, instead just peace-loving, peacekeeping country of people that want to get on in the world, you know, and it is back to Winnie Ewing again and saying, stop the world because Scotland wants to get on, but now we desperately need to get on. The sooner, the better.
Two things in this, Lloyd. It shows two things, not just Jaguar Land Rover, but Scunthorpe, etc. Is that it's colonialism, absolute pure brutal colonialism, and also corporate socialism. The same people who shout how terrible socialism would be for the people are happy to get corporate socialism when they get bailed out, when they're needing a lift up. They love that kind of corporate socialism, but they don't like the real socialism.
Oh, absolutely, Roddy. I mean, it's, you know, remember when Iceland was locking their bankers up in jails, we were bailing them out. These very people who drove hundreds of thousands of people in this country into poverty. Now, the thing that bothers me most of all about all of this, and particularly reminded by so much of what Eva has just said, why is it that the Scottish National Party, and particularly the First Minister of this country, is not screaming from the rooftops? I mean, he made a point yesterday when attacking Anna Sarwar, or rather on Thursday at First Minister's Questions. He accused him of not helping to save Grangemouth. But what did he do to save Grangemouth? More importantly, after Grangemouth was closed, why is he not saying to the people, look, this is the so-called benefit of the union. They're closing. We, the oil-producing country, is having its only refinery closed down. Why is it not lines of attack from the Scottish National Party is exactly laid out by Eva, that prior to the closure of Grangemouth, all of the local newspapers where the English refineries are were already talking about the need to recruit people to cover the new work that was coming their way. Why is it that when billions are being given to Jaguar Land Rover, we don't have John Swinney saying, well, we want our 10% of that so that we can protect Alexander's, the bus company, you know, and the supply chain that runs from Alexander's right through our country. Where is the power of attack from the Scottish National Party, especially in a run-up to an election next year, when clearly the people of this country are being shortchanged to a massive, massive degree, because, again, as Eva said, and as we all know, Britain is England and England is Britain. And the English economy and the English people are a priority for Westminster governments, and we are not, and our people are not. And the fact that we have a government sitting in Edinburgh, which is not a government, it's a management, it manages on behalf of the colonial power, they do not scream from the rooftops when our people are being shortchanged. When there are, take something really, really simple. We are the central and most important economic or energy producing element of this United Kingdom. Without the contribution that we make from our energy to the rest of the United Kingdom, namely England, then they would be in big, big trouble. But we are the people who are paying the highest energy costs of anywhere in the world. In the world, for goodness sake. Electricity is cheaper in Kazakhstan, Armenia, Indonesia, in Fiji, for goodness sake. Now, what is the concomitant cost to our people? Poverty, straightforward, because of larger bills. Increase in prices because of the cost of manufacturing and the cost of delivering goods to supermarkets. The cost of electricity is driving our hospitality sector to the wall. So at every possible turn, the people of Scotland, an energy-rich country, are suffering on a day and daily basis, yet I hear next to nothing from the Scottish Government about that very fact. It's not the issue of we are giving England our energy. That's not the issue. The issue is, without control of that energy, that natural resource that is ours, our people are being driven into poverty. Jobs are being lost, prices are rising, and the concomitant to that is we don't have a national house building operation. Our two only shipyards cannot compete with shipyards in Turkey because, funnily enough, to do electro welding costs 3 times as much in Govan as it does in Turkey. Why? Because of energy costs. Now, these are the things, the joined up thinking that's required from our government to make not just the case for independence, but to make the case for concomitant subsidy to our country while we are within this devolved settlement, rather than the cavalier way that Westminster doles out money to the Ukraine, to Tata Steel, to the refineries, without any reference to us whatsoever, and wherein lie the so-called Barnett consequentials. Never to be seen in circumstances like this, because these are emergency situations. Everything we require to convince our people that a future for Scotland could be better, that their lives could be better, were we an independent country with complete control of our own natural resources. All of the arguments are there. Unfortunately, it's left to the likes of us to make those arguments, because the current management stroke leadership of the Scottish National Party fails at every turn to make use of telling the truth to our people, because, well, why? Why? What are they afeard of? Are they afeard that the people will actually rise up and say, look, you lot, it's about time you started telling the truth and get us out of this nonsense? Why is it that our people are deprived? Why is it that we have the highest energy bills in the whole of the world when we are an energy-rich nation? These are the arguments that should be made by the leaders of the independence movement, and they're not being made. And our people are being kept in the dark over very, very important issues. Our people are kept in anguish about the day that the electricity bill comes through the door, when in actual fact we should be exploiting the anger that those people should feel at the fact that our country produces the energy, but we get charged more than anybody else on the planet for that very same energy. These are simple things. These are simple things. And if independence and the desire for the best possible outcomes for the people of your country were in your heart and in your mind, then these would be the arguments that would be articulated on a day and daily basis, not the nonsense of let's make a new law about stealing dogs.
Folks, the clock is beating us. I had so many other topics I wanted to share with our panel, but the clock keeps beating us. But I would like to make one mention before we go. We talked about it, the gang here, before we started off. And we want to send our thoughts and best wishes to our ex-colleague Yvonne Ridley, who was on this show, as you know, for quite some time. She's now been kidnapped by pirates in international waters. And last time we heard, she was imprisoned in one of these torture camps in Israel. We pray for her safe return home and condemn those who would kidnap her. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we enjoy bringing it to you. Until we see you again, may you and yours take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.